What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Valley coming at you with the one, the only, the certified fantabulous, Mr. Grant Hughes. It's award season again. It's really always award season, but this is our halfway mark check-in. We committed to doing it 4 installments this year. I still think we're going to end up doing it in 3. But given the degree of difficulty I found doing this a second time this year, well, third if you count preseason, we might need a third one just to kind of get our bearings about us before our final picks. But before we dive in and talk about criteria, problem areas, and the actual awards themselves, Mr. Hughes, how the heck are you doing?
I'm feeling conflicted. This was really hard. We talked about it before we started recording, and it's my fault, as you said, because I suggested we do this again at the sort of arbitrary midseason point. Some teams have played 41 games. Clock's ticking. It can't be midseason if we wait another week. So this had to happen. It's good that it's hard, I think, just because we'll have ample room for discussion and how do you justify yourself, sir? I feel like that'll be said pretty often.
I think I would love these. I still do love these exercises and I love talking to you about it, but stuff that can be controversial when we're not meaning it to be controversial. I like having the talk. The research can be the feeling is tedious because I'm so worried about pissing people off. But the discussion would be more fun if I knew that this one wasn't going to invariably lead us to be like, well, hey, this is why Kevin Durant sucks, basically.
Sure.
Or 2, people were going to interpret anything we say that way. Like, oh, you left freaking, I don't know, like Mamu off the all defense team, even though that would be like
made mine. I don't know what your problem is.
So that's what I love these discussions, but I hate sometimes my approach to them is just like, I don't want to anger anyone, but we're invariably people are going to disagree and not all of them are going to be civil or just like, they're just going to dismiss it as like, we're being assholes or we're just wrong. And I hate those types of responses.
I think you should embrace the truth that there's no way for you to do this without getting that reaction. Like there's not a perfect ballot that doesn't incur wrath.
Well, and then you get the people who are like, well, you said this last time, or, oh, how about this? You didn't have him on your team first time. And it's, well, do you want me to be stubborn if I have more information, or do you want me to be flexible based off what we've seen and research? So I hate that element of it too.
Yeah. You got to stop talking to people. I think maybe that's the issue.
I got to stop checking the comments or responding.
Yeah.
I try to only respond to the good comments. I did, before we dig in, and we'll talk about any approach we need to as we get to the individual awards. Just some notable players who cannot be selected for most of these awards now. As a reminder, all rookie, 6th man of the year, and rookie of the year are not encumbered by that 65-game threshold. But notable and eligible players right now, Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, Luka Doncic, Joel Embiid, Chet Holmgren, Kawhi Leonard, Isaiah Hartenstein, just in case anyone wanted him for all defense. And I believe Ja Morant is there or about to be there as we're recording this, closing in on ineligibility. And I find this funny. I don't think he would have made it. Jimmy Butler cannot miss another game this season. Otherwise, he will be ineligible. LaMelo Ball has missed 11 games. Kyrie has missed 10. Kevin Durant has missed 11. Derek Lively's missed 11, but we just got word he's going to be out 2 to 3 months more. So he just, you can pick him now, but he can't be picked. Tari Eason, 15 games missed. And Jalen Suggs, 11 games missed. Here's an interesting one. And I thought about it for most improved player. I can't quite get there yet. Trey Murphy's at 16 games missed.
Oh, yeah.
And so if he sticks there or if he only misses another game the rest of the way, I was struggling with most improved player. So I may not hesitate to just fire at will there if he meets the criteria this time, next time we record.
It's a good way to say, like, hey, I was paying attention. Like, I knew Trey Murphy was good, but that I needed to throw him a bone now before he becomes ineligible.
I honestly thought he was already ineligible.
Right. It seemed like that was a huge storyline, him missing the start of the season. And that surprised. Yeah, it surprises me that it was that few
felt like a decade, and that must be what it is. It was like, oh, he missed 16 games, but it felt like 25 years.
Yeah. But they somehow lost 24 of those 16 games. It was weird. I don't know how they managed to lose that many.
Oh, look, they're on a roll right now. That historic comeback. Look, they're playoffs. Should we talk about the Pelicans? Let's get to the awards. Let's start with the least controversial award out there, the MVP race. For anyone watching on YouTube, our ballots are up on screen. We go 5 deep for MVP and then 3 deep for every other singular award, just because that's how the ballot actually works. Do you want to start us off here, Grant?
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, we're essentially in lockstep. Well, for the first two, which frankly is like where we could just have 99% of
Yeah,
this discussion.
can you start at the back of the ballot for, because it's a two-man race
Yeah.
right now. If I had to pick, maybe, I mean, my third guy would probably be the person that I think could party crash it a little bit, but
I don't think the party is getting crashed. So anyway, so my fifth place MVP is Jalen Brunson, Giannis at 4, Tatum at 3, SGA 2, Jokic 1, and we haven't done all NBA yet. My fifth all NBA spot is not Jalen Brunson. It's going to be Wemby. A little different, but I don't have a great justification for it. Other than, hey, our MVP ballots are different. So that's more interesting.
We're trying to drum up controversy.
Right. Yeah. So what do you have?
So my ballot is, I have Wemby at number 5, Tatum at 4, Giannis at 3, Shea at 2, and Jokic at 1. The Wemby stuff for me, and this will apply to all NBA, I know the Spurs have hit a little bit of a rough patch, but according to B-Ball Index, and not catch-all metrics aren't everything, but the average teammate on the Spurs ranks in the 27th percentile of LeBron. And yet when Wemby's on the court, the Spurs net rating is still in the 70th percentile. And now we're entering territory of like, all right, that's the Timberwolves with Anthony Edwards. And I think we can all agree that the Timberwolves supporting cast in a vacuum has more talent than the Spurs. And so for him to do that lifting, the becoming a high volume, borderline dead eye 3-point shooter, there is no ceiling. The passing has gotten better. There is no ceiling for him. So that became easier than I thought it was going to be, to where I'm kind of thinking him, what would it take for him to usurp Tatum and Giannis? I think Giannis is ahead of Tatum right now. We've seen some slides with Boston, but Giannis's defense, after the first, 10 to 14 games that he played, maybe it wasn't great. I actually thought about him for all defense this time around, where I think we mentioned that the first time, he wasn't going to make that. So that was the differentiator for me. Giannis's numbers are more video game like, but just the lift he gives you on defense is way heavier. And then Tatum, I still think he just remains underappreciated as a total offensive package. And so he's an easy top 5 inclusion for me.
Just to sort of touch on the me having Brunson, you having Wemby. Wemby was like basically on my, that was one of, the toughest decisions at the top to me, but that one was tricky. I think I was just ultimately swayed by, watched a fair amount of Knicks lately, and it's just like everything the Knicks do is so hard, and it all depends on Brunson shouldering this load that's just like unfathomable. Like nothing works without him. Maybe I'm catching the wrong games, but some of the numbers bear that out too. Just his lift is so heavy. And you could argue that Wemby's, based on the numbers you cited too, is like really like low key heavy too. And we just it doesn't look the same as Brunson, who's getting doubled and just like held off the ball constantly and is just like working his ass off. So I was a little bit swayed by that. I have no issue with Wemby beating him out for that.
I want to ask you a question. I think there are a lot of people that would say Karl-Anthony Towns has been more valuable to the Knicks than Jalen Brunson. And what do you make of that?
I think if you're just purely looking at the like scoring efficiency and, Cat's rebounding is incredible and the stretch, like Cat's great. He's going to be on both of our all NBA teams somewhere down the line. But I just think that Brunson, like take Cat off and you lose a huge element of the Knicks, offensive identity, but Brunson sort of is the offense. It's just like the downgrade from Brunson to anyone else you put out there. If it's Campaign or you have Mikal Bridges handle the ball, it's just like, Brunson sort of is the Knicks, like to an extent that like, it's hard to think of another player who so singularly like holds the fate of his team in his hands in a way that I think is sort of underscored or emphasized by the fact that the Knicks are really good and the Spurs aren't. And so that's like a little bit of a distinction. Again, I'm not knocking Wemby at all. I just think the whole plan falls apart without Brunson. And I don't feel like that's true of Cat, especially since like Cat's a bad defender at the most important defensive position. Brunson's a bad defender at one that's like, well, we can deal with that.
I think that's the right call. And I would say that what Towns is doing is incredible, and he's unlocked an element of the Knicks offense, and it's allowed them to navigate Jalen Brunson's slumps and Jalen Brunson's stints on the bench better than they have since Jalen Brunson has been there. But there's a difference between doing that and just being the guy. I'm not just saying every night, but against the best lineups, like every team's best players. And as you laid it out at the top. And so I think if anything, it's more of a testament to what Towns is doing this year. But I really do think that, I don't want to say it's not close. I would listen to debates for it. And I've seen some compelling cases written, but I think that in terms of value, if you want to talk about individual season and numbers, like you said, sure. In terms of value, I think that Jalen Brunson still just has a noticeable edge there.
Yeah. Let's talk about the 1-2 here. I struggled. I went with Jokic. I struggled a lot with it. Can I try an argument on you that like ultimately got me there to put Jokic first over SGA? And you tell me, you can poke holes in it or tell me if you agree or whatever. Go ahead.
My only thing is I don't really listen to you when you talk.
Right.
So no, please go ahead. I'm excited.
Okay. So Jokic is just to start with a number. The Nuggets are like a 124 offensive rating with Jokic on. They're horrendous without him. The Thunder are about a 120 offensive rating with SGA on. That's a pretty big difference, but it favors Jokic, but that's like not the be all end all for me, because you can find plenty of catch-all metrics that just say SGA is having the better season, which basically is like been impossible. Like only Embiid has really like threatened Jokic for the top of a lot of catch-alls lately in past MVP races. So I thought about it in these terms. I think you could call it a wash in terms of like scoring efficiency between the two of them. It's close enough. I think you have to concede Jokic is the better passer because nobody's a better passer than him. Obviously a better rebounder. It helps to be Jokic's size. And defensively, we can agree that SGA is a better defensive guard than Jokic is a defensive center, but center is the most important defensive position on the floor. And SGA is pretty frequently like the fourth or fifth best defender among the players he's on the court with. And just again, like he's not typically like your point of attack guy. He's kind of hanging out, getting steals. Great steals matter. They're not like we go back and forth on how overrated or underrated they are. I think he's a very good defender, albeit one that's not like challenged a lot. Jokic is constantly challenged. He fails a fair amount, but like a center on defense matters a ton. So ultimately it's just like, there's not really anything, if you consider like the value of positional defense, that I think SGA has like a massive advantage in. And I do think there are a couple areas where clearly Jokic is better. But having said that, like this was a decision I made like today, after thinking about it for a while. I'm so open to anyone that's just like, it's SGA. And you can just say that without a lot of statistical support. And I'd be like, yeah, I could see why you think that. So does any of that sway you one way or the other?
I already had Jokic, so of course it's going.
Well, what made the decision for you then? Maybe that's the better question.
I really just look at it. One, it's more of a nutshell argument of you, but in totality, Nikola Jokic has a heavier workload when you combine both ends of the floor than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander does. And the fact that you can say that, even though Shai, a lot of people have talked about him as an all defense candidate, which I think is fine. Defensive playmaking is valuable. The bigger differentiator for me is the Nuggets. They're crescendoing around Jokic. Like maybe they found something with, let's see what happens if Aaron Gordon stops coming off the bench, but they could stagger their lineups accordingly. And Russ is having a renaissance there. We're getting better moments from the youngsters. The quality of talent around Nikola Jokic is just worse. And I'm not going to even just talk about net rating swing here. He has to do more in totality because the team around him is worse. And I don't want to penalize Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for having better talent around him. And by the way, they're missing, I mean, Isaiah Hartenstein's missed a bunch of time. Alex Caruso's missed time. Their center rotation it's never been fully healthy. And then Chet Holmgren, of course, no worse than their third most important player on this team is gone. I think that's a very compelling argument for Shai, as is the fact that the Thunder just might win 68, 70 games at a time when we think the league is more valuable than ever. I'm still swayed by like the Oklahoma City Thunder outscoring opponents by about 18 points per 100 possessions with Shai on the court. It's 14 or 14 and change for the Nuggets. There was 18 and change for the Thunder. The fact that Jokic gets the Nuggets with that talent around him to that level, to where it's within, you could say, breathing distance. When we're like, yes, it's a bigger number, but when you're looking at the percentiles, like the fact that he can bring this Nuggets team there, that still sways me here. And it would be different, I think, if I thought that, I mean, really, I find the two most compelling cases I find for Shai, I guess three is Shai is fucking fantastic. There's one. But two, he is so indispensable to a Thunder offense that has all this talent. You kind of look there and say, holy crap. Like the fact that they are flirting around like top 7 in points scored per possession, that is because of Shai. The minutes without Shai on the court have by and large been an unmitigated offensive disaster. The closest the Thunder have come to anything sustainable, and it's been in a small sample, go watch some of the, when Isaiah Hartenstein's healthy, the I Hart and J Dub minutes. Like they've been able to figure out things there. It would be different for me if Jokic was just this total zero on the defensive end. But when you look at the defensive rebounding and then you combine that with the scoring numbers are comparable this year, and he still shoulders a heavier playmaking burden. So I do think I'm trying not to discredit Shea here. I do officially believe, and I'll be curious to see where we are. Like if the Nuggets continue this track to where, oh, the talent around Jokic is so much worse, doesn't hold as much weight, because it doesn't hold as much weight as it did at the quarter season mark. I'll say that right now. There's a chance one of us will pick Shea, but I do think we've officially entered the territory of either or. And if you're simplifying this down to the Thunder or better, Shea is the best player on that team, I think that's fine if you want to go that way. But like, at least hear out what we're saying or what other people are saying. You can disagree, I think, this season on the selection. This is not a consensus MVP pick.
Nope. I'm totally with you. Like this could have been different today had I come across some other stat that I didn't see that would, tip the scales, and it might very well be different the next time we do this. Which is great. Like this is awesome to have two such, like, how different these two guys are, and we have to try to compare them to each other. It's not the same as like Jokic and Embiid. Like that was, okay, toxic. We get it. Like we can, similar position. It's apples to apples in some sense. This is like apples to, I don't know, like wrenches, or like it's not even, they're so different. Anyway, that's a good MVP talk.
I did want to ask you, because we should have laid this out at the beginning, but people who've listened to this before know, like, we're making our picks. We're not trying to predict anything here. I want to ask you, if the season ended right now, though, what do you think the voting would say?
The SGA would get it like it's something like a landslide, right? The betting odds are like he's minus something, and he's the only one that, like, Jokic is not.
The new blood of it all is, and which I don't factor. I try not to look at, Jokic has 3, it's someone else's turn. I hope I've never thought that way in the past, but I'm a total hypocrite, so who knows? But I do agree with you that I think Shea will win the award, and I'm not gonna. My pick, as of right now, is Jokic. I'm not fighting anybody who votes for Shea.
We have some version of this discussion, or we have had it since Jokic has, been a 1 and 2 time and now 3-time MVP. Like, if he hadn't won one yet, this is a really different discussion. You know what I mean? If we hadn't gotten used to this, because his numbers are insane, except not for him. So it's just kind of like, we really do take it for granted with him in a way. I think that does hurt him. And hopefully you and I aren't doing that, which based on having him first, we're not.
I mean, look, even when I was digging, I was like, the fact that Shea is shooting 60% on twos, which is like almost, it's a 1.5 higher basically than Jokic. When you look at some of the two, I mean, Jokic takes wild twos as well, but just, you think bigger guy being able to back up, like, so some of the work that Shea has to put into his own shot, this is just, I think as of right now, it seems like an all-time close 1-2 MVP.
Yeah, I think so too.
My all-NBA teams are up next, and no surprise, even though there was a difference for me last time, I have my first team is my MVP ballot: Jokic, Shea, Tatum, Giannis, Wemby. So Grant won't have any questions there. Second team, I have Brunson, Evan Mobley, Donovan Mitchell, Steph Curry, Jaren Jackson Jr. My third team is Anthony Edwards, Anthony Davis, Domas Sabonis, Karl-Anthony Towns, Darius Garland. My toughest cut we were talking beforehand, it probably ended up being Cade Cunningham for me, but I did heavily consider J-Dub, Pascal Siakam, Kevin Durant. I'm looking at this, I think most people will be caught off guard by the Steph Curry of it all. The Warriors are a really good basketball team with him on the court still, which is just honestly miraculous when you look at the trajectory of their season. The numbers are still bonkers. Evan Mobley, I actually think, is the most valuable player on the Cavs this year. Was like him and Brunson and Mitchell. Mitchell was not easy second team inclusion. The debate between him and Darius Garland rages on. Jaren Jackson Jr. has been the Grizzlies' best player this year. The offensive growth continues, and he belongs in the DPOI conversation, non-Wemby division, of course. Before I throw it to you to see if there's anything that stands out for you, I really do think that Domantas Sabonis is having like one of the most underappreciated seasons in NBA history. And I say that as someone who didn't have him on the All-Star game when we did our picks a couple weeks ago. If I was to do it now, I'd probably bounce Şengün or someone there. But we're talking 21 points, shooting 48.4% from 3, which leads the league. Lower volume, but 2.4 attempts per game is close to a career high. Basically 63% on twos, leads the league in rebounds per game, averaging over 6 assists per game. The true shooting is the number that I look at. It just like pops. He's at 67.4 and was around 70 for a while. And the numbers when he has played like as the lone star or with 2 stars on the court versus when you mix and match it with DeRozan and De'Aaron Fox, it's really not even close at this point. And so I find myself, when you watch the Kings a lot of the time, and I think you look at the archetypes, I'd be inclined to say that De'Aaron Fox is the better, more important player. But this season, I don't know how you look at these numbers and how you like Sabonis. I also think there's been value in. We had concerns about the pecking order of the Kings offense. And some of that's coming to bear out when you look at Keegan Murray, even a little bit of Malik Monk. But like Sabonis is kind of just figuring it out and might have had like the easiest time adjusting as everyone. And like he is being used like somewhat differently. So he's having a fantastic year. And I went into this just kind of thinking to myself, like I was going to have to find a way to get him on the third team. And that ended up with some tough cuts, but I think he has, I'll say this, a stronger second team case than let's bounce him from all NBA entirely.
Oh man, that makes me feel terrible. Cause I had similar thoughts where it's like, at some point the numbers are just, you cannot ignore them. Like I didn't know, I knew the 3-point volume was up. I knew it was over 40%. I didn't realize it was 48%. It's just like
it's 2.5 attempts per game though. So yeah, they're wide open.
It's still like the scouting report is like fire away, please. Cause that means you're not doing some elbow hub stuff or putting guys in the basket underneath, but still like I don't know. And just the points, rebounds, assists of it all and the scoring efficiency. And like he does. Now, much of this has to do with how bad the Kings backup bigs are, but he grades out real well in a lot of defensive catch-alls that factor in like on-off stuff. So I still think that's mostly a mirage. I think he still is what he is defensively, which is to say like kind of a problem if you're trying to win high-level games. But yeah, I feel really bad. I have him kind of on my unofficial 4th team. And that's just because, you know, fortunately, there's like 1 or 2 third teamers that I have that are probably going to be ineligible. And then I'll be able to like move him up. Cade is kind of in that same boat for me. I don't really have any knocks here. I think one clear difference that jumps out is you've got Mitchell second team and as a second Cav there. I also have 2 Cavs on the second team, but by the way, our first teams are the same. And I explained kind of the logical incongruity of me having Brunson 5th in MVP and on a second team, but whatever. Did you struggle? I mean, you said the Garland Mitchell debate rages on. What landed you on Mitchell as a second teamer over Garland?
We kind of went through this when we did the All-Star stuff. I think that Darius Garland is way more important at driving offense and better, maybe not way better, but better at driving offense for everybody else and a comparable scorer at this point, even though they're used in different ways. But Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland will, I think, take on tougher assignments on defense. Mitchell's just been better in his defensive role than Garland. And I think the thing that finally sold it for me, and this would be the case if, you know, I would say that I think Mobley is the most valuable Cav. If you want to say Mitchell's the most valuable Cav, I think the strongest argument would be when you're on offense and the other team is going to zero in on somebody, it is always going to be Donovan Mitchell when you have the full cast on the floor.
Yep. I actually agree with that. And yet I have Garland second team and Mitchell third. Which I guess says that I'm looking more at like this season's production as opposed to what I think we both like in your head and your heart know, like Mitchell's the guy, right? Of Garland and Mitchell, like Mitchell's the guy that's going to be taking the biggest shots. That is the bigger focal point of defensive game planning, like that kind of thing. I just, you know, Garland's been a more efficient scorer. He's a better facilitator this year. And so like, I just had to reward him there. I don't really have any like knocks or quibbles at all with the rest of your team. What do you make
of the Steph? Because I know you do have him on a team, but I have him second team. And I think some people might think that I might be weighting stats too heavily when I say this. Was like, look at what the Warriors offense is with and without him. But I still think, aside from Nikola Jokic, I don't know that there's anyone who can elevate, not even just elevate the ceiling, but define it regardless of the context of who's around him. Like there's Jokic and then there's Steph Curry still for me, because you just look at the talent around him in terms of, the gravity. No one really, there's very few players that have it. And then if they do, if you're going to go with a Buddy Hield, like, well, how inconsistent are they? And then when you just kind of look at the second, like the surrounding the playmaking or just the shot making in general. This is per B-ball index. Steph's teammates rank in the 8th percentile of overall shot making ability. And the fact that, okay, he's on the court, not only are they winning those minutes, I think they're like a plus. It's actually dropped. It was like a +8 for the longest time, but the Warriors or Warriorsing or whatever, they're still a plus 4.4 with him on the court with an offense in the 80, like a 119 offense rating. And that's the 84th percentile. I just can't. And this isn't even, and he's old. No, it's like, look at who's the second best offensive player on the Warriors?
Jonathan Kuminga. And he's not playing.
You know what? Before he got injured, he was having one of his like moments, his streaks. Yeah. That's like the gap between Steph Curry and the Warriors' second best offensive player. Where is it larger? Would you say it's even Jokic and Murray might not even be as large?
No, I think that's a great point. And I think kind of ironically, as I'm thinking about it, some of what recommends Steph, which is that the numbers you're talking about, and like, as on an individual basis, still like hyper efficient, forget like the impact he has on just a trash, supporting cast. I think like, and so all that's still great. And the degree of difficulty is off the charts. Like the way that he's being defended is different than he's ever been defended before because teams can get away with it. Like they can just sell out beyond the most egregious sellout you've ever seen to try to stop him. And he still finds crevices and he still gets up impossible shots and makes enough of them. I think what I'm focused on is just like how hard it looks for him. And maybe that's not fair. So I have him on the third team. And like, I think if I were to switch anything, having talked about it now, I'd probably go. So I have Anthony Davis as a second teamer. I might swap Davis and Steph on that logic. Is just like, he's still great despite it never being harder from a like tactical standpoint. And the fact that he's as old as he is and is able to hold up. So like, yeah, I'll leave it as it is, but I think that's, I think there's a great case for him to be a second teamer. I don't have an issue at all. So my first team, we're the same, Jokic, SGA, Tatum, Giannis, Wemby. Second team, we both also have Brunson, Mobley, Jaren Jackson Jr. Jackson Jr. was like never had a chance of falling to third team for me. Like he was just, I couldn't put him on first because that top 5 guys are just a different level. He was like just an absolute lock with Brunson and Mobley as a second teamer.
He is. I have a fun Jaren Jackson Jr. stat. He is 12th, and this is all among anyone who's played at least 1,000 minutes this year. 12th in points per 100, points per 75 possessions above expectation, which speaks to just the way he's scoring in the role that he has this year. And look, his efficiency is dipped, and I still just like don't care.
You watch him play, and like the drives are just undeniable. Like the way that Memphis spaces the floor, as I think about it more, it almost seems like this wonky offense they play that like basically never screens is almost like built to say like Jaren Jackson Jr. as a driver is going to be maybe the second most important facet of our offense and the most important when Ja Morant's not playing, which happens a lot. And his ability to just get to like 6 feet and hit weird, like floaty push half hook shots at rates that are just, that's what you're probably talking about. I hadn't heard the expected points per 75. It's like he takes and makes a lot of really hard in between shots. And I mean, I've seen him be able to hit like turnaround hooks over either shoulder this year. He's a really good offensive player. And like, by the way, is going to be on our DPOY ballots very high too. So easy picks there. I went with Garland over Mitchell. As I said, I got Anthony Davis as a second teamer over Steph, which I feel not great about right now, but whatever, small distinction. The rest of my third team, I do have Mitchell there. I have Anthony Edwards. I have Kyrie Irving. That's a guy that's going to fall off, and maybe that's how I get Sabonis in there after Kyrie presumably falls below the games threshold. And then Cat was an easy third teamer. Cat was going to be on one of these no matter what. I ran out of spots, and he ended up with I guess technically my last third team spot.
Kyrie Irving was another tough cut for me, but the minutes with him and then without Luka went from kind of peachy keen to they've started to turn. And when part of the theory of his value is that, and I know he missed time with the back stuff, but that's also part of this. So I have a question for you about, we both had Anthony Edwards third team. I've seen him be included everywhere from first team to not even on the All-NBA list. And I know there's just that variability caked in. Where are you sort of at with this season he's having and his overarching value, of course.
Kind of two controlling thoughts. One, which we've talked about for a lot of the season, is like, it's incredible the type of scorer that he's become and maybe has had to become for this particular Wolves team. The 3-point volume, still making well over 40%. His shot diet, at least as a perimeter shooter, is hard. So that's like, that's beyond impressive. And then it's just, the offense is what it is. He's the best offensive player on the team, and the offense isn't good, generally speaking. So like, what are we, so I guess the answer would be, he was way closer to falling off the top, my third team, than he was to like even sniffing first team, maybe second, I guess. But I think I fall more in the camp of like, the bottom line just sort of is what it is. And he's the best offensive player on a team whose offense isn't very good. That's an oversimplification, because it's hard to have a good offense with Rudy Gobert and Julius Randle ball stopping and Mike Conley, having nights where he just can't play.
That it's even above average with Anthony Edwards on the court,
right?
Is
it's hard to know which way that cuts. I think like in an ideal situation with spacing and where he's still more of a driver, like second, or who knows what we'd be talking about with him. But it's kind of we don't have like a control to the experiment to know what it would look like if he weren't in these particular circumstances. Do you want to talk about like toughest omissions, guys that just, were maybe you had on a team and then had to cut, or any like real, like, trouble spots?
I want to get out in front of this, and we both didn't have him, or either of them, I guess you could say. Not having Kevin Durant feels weird when you look at the numbers and even when you watch him, and he still just hits these stupid, and I will tweet out the clips because I will come away just mesmerized by the shots he's hitting and the efficiency at which he can hit them. He has been complicit in the Suns' 3-point attempt rate plummeting over the past couple months. And like, he wasn't the one who jacked up his 3-point volume in net as some of like the other guys did, or the team at large. And the more I watch the Suns, the more, even on the nights when Devin Booker is not as efficient, I'm just like, well, Devin Booker is their best player, and I can't bring myself to put him on one of these teams because he had a rough, 6 or 8 weeks of the season, which is still a pretty big chunk of the season thus far. Why do I feel compelled to put in Kevin Durant, who has missed time and who I just think I would need to see numbers on this? And I know he still draws a ton of double teams, but like, what is the value? Like, how many of those, like, okay, they might end in some tough buckets being made, but like, what is his assist rate on those double teams? What's the turnover rate? And here I am diminishing Kevin Durant's value. When the Suns have been as upside down as they are, they're losing their big 3 minutes. And so I just kind of wrote it off as that. And also, just the more I watch the Suns, you will not convince me with any numbers right now that Kevin Durant is a more valuable player than Devin Booker. And if I don't feel strongly compelled, and by the way, I probably said something different during our quarter season. I might have had Kevin Durant on second team. I think that's what I did.
I think we both had him on a team for sure.
I did, because he's been so great, but now I'm starting to question the context under which it's coming. And look, if you say that's stupid, blame the Suns. Then they're twisting everybody into a pretzel, right down to their pick swap, like trading picks for multiple picks and swapping those picks with the least favorable swaps with the most favorable swaps from the team that has fewer swaps than them with a little bit more least favorable picks to send out. So that was leaving Kevin Durant off felt wrong, and including him felt wrong. And maybe that's a microcosm of the 2024-2025 Phoenix Suns.
That's how you end up on the unofficial fourth team. So the other guy I think that we probably got to discuss, I already talked about Sabonis. He was a really tough omission here. And I guess relatedly, De'Aaron Fox. I just think the efficiency is dipped enough, and the Kings just aren't good enough for us to really even think about two guys. Cade Cunningham didn't make either of our teams. And I have watching him lately. It's like, that guy feels like an all NBA player. Still around 54, 55 true shooting, which is not good enough. Right. Still a heavy lift, still just such a complete offensive player, which is weird to say. As I just said, he's 54, 55 true shooting, but I don't know. I feel, it doesn't sit well with me that we didn't get him on there, but then it just becomes a question of who are you taking off? And that, I guess maybe for me, it'd be like Kyrie, I guess, which he will fall off. That was a tough one for me. I'm sure you felt the same way, because you were in on Cade, I think a little sooner than I was this year.
Right. And I initially, because we do talk, but anyone who thinks that research doesn't go into this, and so Grant and I will spend hours doing research, and then we kind of confer beforehand while we're finishing up the graphics. I had Cade over Anthony Davis, and I was trying to make a case myself. And I know Davis on offense is not the Davis we saw to start the season, but where would the Lakers like be without what he does on defense? They're not even a great defensive team. That's with Anthony Davis, I think, still being a great defensive player. I couldn't get there. So yeah, he was there. I mean, like both the Pacers stars, right? Siakam was a tougher cut for me in like totality, just because he's had the better wire-to-wire season. But like Tyrese Halliburton just looks the past like 2 months or so like Tyrese Halliburton.
Yeah, there he is. There's our guy. He came back. Good to see. That was tough. Yeah, both those guys were. I actually had Siakam, I think, on a third team in like an early draft of this, and I just kept thinking like I just moved him down and down and down, and he fell off. Yeah,
well,
Durant
you need
was
to answer for your sin, your cardinal sin. Where's Jalen Williams?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the scoring efficiency. It's shooting under 34% from three now, and as it's just like it's an indivisible part of the Jalen Williams discussion is just like he isn't able to be the lead offensive guy when SGA is off the floor. Despite being very, very good at literally everything that you want an NBA basketball player to be good at, that's a pretty, and again, Jalen Williams is great. Like he's a really good player. Like he's the second best player on a team that might, if they go nuts, are going to threaten the all-time wins record. Like that's a true statement. It's just the scoring efficiency is down. He doesn't do the one thing you really do need him to do for a few minutes a game for this team. Not to say he won't ever do that. Still obviously young enough to get there. It was just a numbers game, and the offense wasn't what it needed to be to get him on this team. And I think we're maybe also being a little farther away from the holy shit, he's playing center on defense stretch of the season, which was like a real defining thing for him. And maybe we're going to get back to that a little more, but still that's kind of where I landed. I mean, didn't you have him on a team last time we did this?
I had him on second team. The offensive efficiency has fallen off. I think the defense has been, I think he's gotten better defensively. And by the way, he's still among, what did I have the filter on? Players with 500 minutes. This doesn't feel right. Even having, I mean, we know I don't watch any games, but even having watched the Thunder, among everyone who's played at least 500 minutes, he is second in percentage of shots at the rim contested. And that's crazy. Just like, that feels wrong. Jalen Williams is what, 6'6"?
I mean, sure.
So I just don't, he's been great, but the offensive efficiency and the minutes, like if you're talking about, I mean, like we're just talking about dinging Shea for his efficiency, and it's Jalen Williams has an easier offensive role than Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, and like the 3-point clip, like that kind of dipping, and I don't want to say the inability, but like the swing piece for him, because if I had to pick right now, I still think J-Dub makes multiple All-NBA teams over the course of his career.
I agree.
But the swing, if he is never the guy that can run the offense independent of, I'm not even saying like needs to be the one, like the best offensive player on a really good team, but can lead the offense when the best offensive player on your team is off the court. That is, and look, those minutes were better last year, which was another thing that I was kind of thinking about. So maybe some of it's a symptom of the personnel that's around him this year and the way they're being run. But I mean, I would love for I don't necessarily need a fourth All-NBA team, but I think the league is deep enough that it'd be great if we had it. And I would also like a third all-defense team. Totally unrelated to this discussion, but still.
Well, we're going to do one.
We're going to do Defensive Player of the Year now, though, Grant. You want to take, well, I'll take us through this because your all defense teams will come up first. We have the same ballots. I'll just take us through both of ours. Wemby at 1, Evan Mobley at 2, Jaren Jackson Jr. at 3. Is there an argument against Wemby at 1?
Not that I'm really willing to listen to. I think like I guess you could cite like, well, there are players who allow a lower field goal percentage at the rim. And there's, I guess you could put cases together, but if you've watched 5 Spurs games this year, just say 5, you are not open to the argument that there's a better defensive player on the planet.
And it's not to say that he's the most intelligible defender. A lot of what he's smart, by the way. I think when you look at some of the passes he's making this year, like the IQ is there, but like the physical tools and knowing how to use them, and the fact that he still contests so many shots around the rim, even though he's like flying around all over the place. And look, a lot of like if you go by Dunks and Threes' defensive EPM, like he's not even going to rank in the top 5 of actual. I'm looking at they have a projected tab, but I'm looking at the actuals right now. According to that, I'm not even looking at it. It's open, but Alex Caruso would be defensive player of the year if you're going off that, followed by Isaiah Hartenstein. And then
I believe Sabonis is not very low on that list. Sabonis is up there on that list. So trust the DEPM at your own risk.
Look, defense is just like you need to watch
You
and
gotta.
see to at least have an opinion here. And even, I mean, I don't watch or see, but I can't, I don't know what the case is against him. If you want to look at it and say, oh, the Spurs aren't like a top 10 defensive team overall, they rate in the 78th percentile of defense when he's on the court. That's high enough when you're looking at like, all right, he's playing with like, there's some like Julian Champagny and you have Jeremy Sohan and Steph Castle, but like Steph Castle's a rookie. It's just, he has the counting stats and he passes the eye test for me. He has the advanced metrics, even if he's not going to lead in a lot of them.
Yeah. And then after, I mean, I think Mobley is, to me, well, it's not as locked in as Wemby is at 1, but I just felt like it was such a clear 1, 2, 3. And Mobley, his mobility, the way he can get in a stance and guard, 1 to 4, just obviously 5, but like his perimeter defense is just all I can do when I watch the Cavs is think like, man, that's going to work in the playoffs. That's going to wreck a lot of teams' plans. If you're trying to, you're going to have to really work hard to get the right switches and the right two guys involved in pick and roll and handoff actions. Because if Mobley's in it, like that play is not going anywhere. And he just, his versatility, his added strength, we talk about it mostly in terms of what he's doing offensively. His strength is like, now you don't really move him the way that I think you used to be able to with physicality. So like I think he might be I like the idea of like, there's weakness free, like offensive players. He's kind of a weakness free defensive player. I don't know what what do you do against Mobley? That's like, well, this is the way we can make it work.
And I'm not saying he will wind up having the better body of defensive work than Giannis, but the thing that distinguishes him to me, aside from the Bucks have, even like in past years, Giannis at center was a last resort, is like he can do the helper stuff, but if you need him to just go check that one guy, it's not what you want him to do, but he can also do that. And this is just, I guess he's kind of like Giannis and Bam Adebayo combined. Is that, that's
except he can shoot threes, which neither of those guys ever did.
That's not, did you factor that into this discussion?
No, I'm
just
nitpicking.
And then Jaren Jackson Jr., just spectacular. Grizzlies, still the only team as we record this, by the way, in the top 5 of offense and defense.
Yeah.
And honestly, you can watch the Grizzlies. That is inexplicable when you look at the talent on their roster and the concerns, maybe not so much on defense, but about their offense. And I hope everyone's checked out the Ben Taylor video by now. But like, even knowing what they're doing, it's inexplicable. He's been great though. And I do think it's helped that they've been able to put him, I feel like, in a more idealistic role for him this year, but he's just been the fulcrum of what is one of the 5 best defenses in the league. And the Grizzlies have, what are the Cavs at in defense right now? I haven't checked them, but the Grizzlies have the best defense of anyone on this list too. So that would be the other thing. You have that, and the fact that Jaren Jackson Jr. is someone who is going to make that team like the 5th best defense in the league better when he's on the court. I mean, like, there's a real testament to that. Yeah. So I don't lament this yet. Do you think we'll get to a point where Wemby's just going to rack up so many almost unchallenged Defensive Player of the Year awards that you'll kind of regret, like, oh, now we're getting excited about the number 2, number 3 debate?
Probably. Or it's like, should we have just given Mobley one now because this is his last chance?
I tried to 2 years ago.
Yeah, well, you're ahead of the curve. Yeah, I think it's not like a hot take. Wemby's just going to lock this down for a really long time if he's healthy. So sorry everybody else.
You want to take us through your all defense squads?
Yeah, so got the top 3 guys there. Wemby, Mobley, Triple J. So I've made a couple changes from last time, and really it's pretty obvious. I just skewed bigger. I just skewed towards centers. And so I have Rudy Gobert and Ivica Zubac on my first team. Gobert hasn't been as good as he was before, but he was Defensive Player of the Year last year. So if he's the 4th or 5th best defensive player, that's still pretty good, even if he's regressed a little bit. The rim protection still is great. Defensive rebounding, similar case for Zubac. And Zubac, to distinguish him a little bit, is just like, we gotta give somebody credit for this Clippers thing. And like, he's been really underrated this year. I think you could make a case he's had a lot of offensive growth too, sort of by like necessity. But the Clips defense like really does center around him. They have good point of attack defenders. Chris Dunn is, I think, going to be on both of our second teams. Maybe I forget what you did with him on yours.
That's a fact. I don't know. I think Chris Dunn is better. And I didn't have Zubac on one of my all defense teams, but I think you can also make the case that he might be more important to the Clippers defense when you're just looking at the minutes played and their lack of alternatives.
Well, yeah, very
him.
true. Very true. Yeah. Like if you're talking about replacement values, like there's not another Chris Dunn approximation on that team. The more I think about it, the more it's like centers just matter more. Centers like are a team's defense. You know, when we talk, you can hide bad point of attack defenders, you can stick guys in the corner, but it's just like the game changing defenders just are, with some exceptions. We'll talk about them unless you're like insanely disruptive or you're like a Tony Allen level, like I will just make it impossible for a wing to score. It's just, I'm going to go center. So that's a little bit, I just kind of had a philosophical kind of, I just had to make that decision. So that's first team. Second team, as I mentioned, Chris Dunn, Anthony Davis, Dyson Daniels, which is that kind of like just insanely disruptive wing / guard that I was talking about. Still got Jade up there. That was before you even cited that ridiculous shots contested inside stat. And Amen Thompson, another just like the game wrecker kind of mold as a wing. So anything there you wanted to talk about, or anything significantly different from yours?
Why Amen Thompson over Dillon Brooks?
I think Thompson is more disruptive. I think I've probably just seen him completely eliminate guys at the 1, 2, and 3 in ways that Brooks, I don't think, has this year. I think like low key Brooks is like, I think Brooks is like a negative wingspan guy, or like pretty close to it, whereas Thompson just can reach everything. It's probably more, I think there probably are numbers that like Brooks a little better. I think Thompson's just the athleticism, the length, the versatility, the way that he blows plays up, like whether he's coming from a help position or on the ball, it just feels different. Like I think being guarded by either of those guys sucks. But with Brooks, it's because like he's gonna hold you and he's gonna, be ultra physical. With Thompson, it's like you're like being guarded by a 3-headed like king cobra or something, where it's just like anywhere you go, he's just gonna he's defensive poison. I don't know. I'm struggling with the analogy.
I think that's fair. I'll throw mine up because I have both of the Rockets on my teams, but my first team is eerily similar. Well, not really. We have Wemby, Evan Mobley, Jaren Jackson Jr., my 3 DPOY candidates. Then I have Lou Dort, who I think is in the realm of, I still feel like the job that he's told to do, where it's you just have to go check that best perimeter player for the most part, is what Dillon Brooks does in Houston. And I know part of that might have been skewed by, Amen Thompson was coming off the bench for so long, but I mean, that's also like the minutes between Amen Thompson and Dillon Brooks for me, that gap is closed. They're within like, I think Amen Thompson's like 150 minutes fewer or whatever than Brooks. But I think Brooks's job is harder. And I think Dort, independent of one of the bigs who neither of whom has played enough to get consideration here, just has the hardest job on the Thunder. And I think it goes overlooked because by having that job, and he does it better, I think, than Klay Thompson did, it does take away from the counting stats that a lot, like for him to be, like if you wanted him to be disruptive, like, no, I'm not saying he could beat Dyson Daniels, who I also have on my first team, by the way, because Dyson Daniels is equal parts. Okay, he has the counting stats and disruptive, and that dude is just defending like the best players on the court all the time as well. That's
every night.
You had him first team last time. I didn't. I think I've seen a lot of the Hawks over this last quarter of the season, and they're my team where if I was running them, I'd do something stupid because I think that there's something there at the trade deadline is what I mean. So those are Dyson Daniels for me. Like if he's going to shoulder that type of responsibility while still being disruptive, he's going to be in my second team. Bam Adebayo, Anthony Davis, Dillon Brooks, Amen Thompson, and Chris Dunn. Ivica Zubac, Jalen Williams were both very tough cuts for me. And this is the second time I think I've said Ivica Zubac is a very tough cut for me. So I might just need to, adult up and put him on one of these teams. That's why I really want a third team. But I do think that if you ask me to pick a Rockets player, maybe this is different by season's end. Like if Jabari Smith comes back and Amen Thompson is still starting, I just still think that Dillon Brooks has been the more valuable defender for Houston. But they're both, I mean, Jabari Smith Jr. is missing time, Tari Eason's missing time, and the defense just doesn't miss a beat because of these two guys, basically.
Yeah. It's funny with the Rockets, like, this is part of like why Şengün might get you gave him an all-star consideration. I had him kind of like, I didn't put him on an all NBA team, but I thought about it. It's like, I don't know. He's been a big part of that defense too, but like, so is Brooks, so is Thompson. So is Tari Eason. There's so many guys that's like, the credit is being like split. So, I mean, which is a great problem to have and why their defense is so devastating.
Suggs is also a tough cut, by the way. I'm wondering if well, not so much with Eason, just because the minutes weren't there. I do wonder if there's a bias creeping in when I'm looking about players that seem like they're going to lose their ineligibility. And so, like, I know Tari Eason, 15 games missed. He's not going to be eligible.
Right.
And then Jalen Suggs he's at 11 right now. And it's right. Well, how much time is he actually going to wind up missing? Had Derek Lively played more and not been about to miss? I mean, I know he only missed 11 games as of now, but you had him on your all defense team last time around.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about Anunoby because he didn't make either of our teams. He was like a tough cut for me, certainly reputationally, and certainly like practically speaking. They're like I think you said like in a postseason setting, like there's not a lot of guys you'd rather have on your team defensively than him. So I'm curious how come he didn't make the cut for you.
He made second team last time for me. He's been gambling a little too much. And maybe it's because the Knicks are worse around him than the Raptors. Well, the defensive talent, I mean. When you look at some of the talent he had around him in Toronto and then the talent that was around him last year, that gambling doesn't fly with the current personnel. And I think that might have tinged me a bit against it. So I think you could argue, though, that this is an indictment of how teams are built, but I think you can argue, like, you pull OG Anunoby off the Knicks, and are they just the worst defense in the league?
Right. Suddenly Mikal Bridges has to be your like point of attack guy and like helping like jump passing lane steals wing. And he can't guard centers like OG can if you need him. Like they would be in big trouble without him for sure. Generally speaking, don't gamble if Cat is your backline defender.
Honestly, don't gamble if you also have Jalen Brunson on your team as well. Probably he's not going to be on the back line much, but still. So yeah, I've also, the thing I've struggled with, and it happened. So I only had the Rockets doubling up here, is I find myself inclined to like want to spread the love where it's okay. I recognize this team. Like, should I have included OG Anunoby over Ahmed Thompson or Dylan Brooks just to like, he's represented in here, or like, and did that creep into my logic a little bit with the Thunder? Because I do think J-Dub has a really strong case to make all defense. You did not have Lou Dort though at all, right?
No, I was just looking at yours. I would have had Dort ahead of Brooks, for example, and probably Adebayo, but like the Thunder are a little bit that way too, with a little bit of a Houston problem. Like imagine, well, first of all, if Chet were playing, he would have been on the first team. If Chet had played enough, I think that would have been a pretty easy one for me. I would have bumped Zubats or Gobert. And then, J-Dub, good defender, SGA, we talked about a little bit.
Caruso when he's healthy. They could have had, like, if let's just say no one missed games, or everyone was going to play in at least 65 games. Ooh. The list of players for the Thunder that you could probably make a reasonable case for: Caruso, Dort, J-Dub, Holmgren. Hartenstein is 5. I think some people would say, you got to add SGA to that list, or you have to add Peyton Wallace to that list.
I think they could have had 4 of my 10 first and second team spots if everybody was healthy.
That team is fucking nuts. We move on to, I don't even know what award is next. I already forgot. Rookie of the Year, which is yours to take us through.
All right. So this is, guess what, guys? The draft class was not great. This is a weird rookie season. I got Jalen Wells first. Good job, number 39 pick. Zach Edey, second. Good job, Memphis Grizzlies. You got you're 2 for 2. And then I have Steph Castle third. I still think of those 3, Steph Castle is someone that has like pretty clearly the highest ceiling. The scoring efficiency just isn't good enough. And maybe that's just where you stop. The scoring efficiency is not good enough. I think he's really just has shown so many flashes as a defender, as a driver, as a passer, like pretty smart. The combo, I think I've said this before, of his athleticism and like willingness to pass and ability to pass is real scary. Like if he ever is a player that defenses have to close out on, he's like, man, like that's going to be trouble. So he's third here, but I just acknowledge, you can tell me whether you agree that if you had to bet on, the next 5 years of any of these guys we have on our list, you'd probably pick him.
I'm Jalen Wells pilled. I'm not gonna lie. Like, you give me the guy who they've had him defend some bigs in addition to just covering like these tough perimeter assignments on a team that again is top 5 in defense and he's hitting 3. So he was my one. You're probably right with just in terms of swinging. Yeah, it would be Steph.
Just talking upside, I guess. I like Castle's upside's higher. Not sure he's gonna hit it. Wells is just gonna be a starter for like forever, I guess.
So I have Steph Castle 2, and I still have McCain at 3. And the games minimum don't apply. And then when I was digging into it, he's played 5 as we're recording this. He's played 5 fewer minutes than Zach Edey at this point. And so I was considering Zach Edey. I'm like, I'm overthinking this. Jared McCain can still, technically he could still be here when we do this at the end of the year. But now specifically, I think he could still be there. Just what he was doing on offense was bonkers.
Yeah.
For Steph Castle to be as good defensively too, as you are as a rookie, I think is a big deal. That coupled with the volume of his role, I do think for me, if you wanted Steph Castle to win, the difficulty of Jalen Wells' role on defense, I think it exceeds the difficulty of Steph Castle's role at either end of the floor.
100%
right now.
Yeah.
So that's the differentiation. Just like he can shoot threes, and yes, his role's simpler. But I really like Steph Castle is strong. He can get to the rim. Like he's one of the better guys at creating like shots at the rim. But like the efficiency from everywhere just basically needs to get better. And look, he's still, there's like, I guess some hesitance on his threes, but like he's been taking them for the most part all year. And if it ever starts to go down, like even just a set jumper, that becomes a really big deal. And I do like the lane navigation from him already. The all rookie teams I have on mine, Jalen Wells, Steph Castle, and McCain are on first team. Those are my all rookie ballot. Then Zach Edey, of course, who's just, so there's the defensive aspect component of what he does. But then there's also kind of, oh, he's shooting okay from three on like, he's taking what, like 34 threes or something on the season. I don't hate it. I kind of wish he played more.
Just under 40%. Like last time I looked it up, and it's the volume isn't enough, but it's like, if that's a thing, we got that gets pretty interesting.
Of the first team, and I guess maybe Sarr's creeping in here, but like he has, if you're talking Wells and Castle and Edey, who has the most offensive utility right now of the three?
Oh,
is it just Castle because of the ball handling? But Edey might have a case.
I think it might actually be like Wells is just the plug and play. Like he's going to make enough threes and, be low usage. But Edey, you really can't, like there are just matchups where he's just too big and you can just throw it in. He's going to score. He can roll and just be taller than everyone like that. And then if you get any kind of threes, it's kind of like, I mean, Brook Lopez was a really good like post technician. So it's not quite the same because Edey's just kind of forceful. But it's like you get both versions of Brook Lopez in Zach Edey. Like you get the pre 3-point shooting and the post if things go right for him. So pretty interesting thing to think about.
And then I have Sarr in my first team. I don't even think he did not make my second team last time. And so a few things account for this. Since the last time that we did this exercise, Alex Sarr's looked way better on offense. He is shooting 37.5% on threes on 5 attempts per game. He's shooting over 75% in the restricted area. And I think he's done a better job as a passer in the sense of just getting off the ball more quickly and finding teammates who are on the move or looking ahead in transition. And at some point, like you have to weight the volume of his role. And he is also, again, the Wizards aren't good defensively, but you can see that hot take. You could see like the outline of a good defensive player in Sarr. And I mentioned before how J-Dub is second in the percentage of shots contested at the rim this season, minimum 500 minutes. Alex Sarr is first. And so while the numbers still may not be great, like you'd like him to save more points at the rim or have a lower percentage allowed, basically, that role as a rookie to shoulder is just so huge. And so when we get to like these all league teams, I do try to go with outstanding rather than look at how many minutes they played, but like he's doubled up the minutes basically that Zach Edey has played right now. And so just the offensive growth that he has shown, I still don't know what he's going to be as someone with a floor game. Can he hit the midi? But I think you have to be encouraged if you're a Wizards fan based off what Sarr has done. And then my second team, Yves Missi, Zach Risache, Donovan Clingan, who's fifth, Grant, in points saved at the rim per 75 possessions this year. I question whether he'll end up playing enough to ultimately make this team, but I think he has, if he's available enough, he might have a top 3 rookie of the year case. Still have Bub Carrington. I flirted with including him or Tristan Da Silva here. And then I have Ryan Dunn. You can no longer say that he's contributing to a good team, but to be like to actualize the 3-and-D role, even if the efficiency has slid, the stuff he's doing on defense as a rookie is impressive.
Yeah. And he's on a better team than 3 of the other 4 players on your second team. So it still counts for something.
Before we get into some tough cuts, who's on your all rookie teams?
Yeah. So Wells, Edey, Castle, obviously. I did put Missi on the first team, and that it was tough between him. Like I could have just, the right answer still probably is McCain, but I just am kind of like anticipating, his season's over. It's like, I think as recently as a couple weeks ago, he was still like 5th in rookie scoring and like 2nd in made 3. Just like he's going to be top 10 in a bunch of counting stats despite missing 3/4 of the year.
And don't you just, like I said before, you have Edie on your first team who's played 5 minutes more.
Right. It's like, so clearly my criteria is kind of just like pricing in. Yeah, maybe that's not fair at all, actually, but it's pricing in like,
I think it's, if
McCain's done, Edie's going to play however many more
yeah.
games. So yeah, I had Misi there. Just quietly has been like, if you told the Pelicans, hey, this is what you're going to get from Misi as a starting center this year, like before the season, they'd be like, oh, we're going to win 57 games. Like, cause everything else will go great. Right. Like that's,
yeah, I did consider him for first team. I just wish he did a little bit more of the traditional big man stuff on defense better.
Right. Pretty limited
for a rookie on the Pelicans of all teams right now, but
yeah, not exactly the most stable, consistent environment, not always supported by the most surrounding talent. So I also had Sarr first team. I think I had him like on an unofficial fourth team last time around. And are you prepared for some really trenchant, like incisive analysis that you've never heard before about Alex Sarr?
Ready.
Are you ready? Dan, I think the game is slowing down for him. Have you
Whoa.
ever heard anybody say that?
How do you feel about his feel?
I think he's starting to see the pictures. What else do they always say? Like he's seen enough pictures now to where he just, I had the exact same reaction you did watching them a little more, even in like short stints against the Lakers on Tuesday night. Like I think compared to the first quarter of the season where he was like lost and you're like, I can't even see a way to this guy being impactful other than maybe he'll block shots. The 3-point shooting is a real thing. It seems like he's so much smoother, so much more like just, I guess, confident going to the basket. Like he looks, I can see it now. Like I get it. And I really wonder what we would think of him if we hadn't gone into this draft being told over and over and over again that there's just not a guy in this draft. There's not, because you could see the outlines right now of someone that's like, yeah, that's a top 5 pick in almost any draft. Like, I'm not saying he'll get to that level, but I can understand now, like what this might look like in a few years. And it's pretty encouraging on both ends, honestly, which is like a shock based on how ugly things were early. So he's the last first teamer for me. McCain, I stuck on the second team. Reese, Shea, Carrington, Klingon. So we have the same second. The only difference is I have Misi first team and McCain second between our two teams. Yeah, Dunn's also on my second team.
There's other names that I'm sure I'm actually looking at the docs. I know both of us considered Oso Iguodaro, Ron Holland II creeping in there, 62% shooting on 2. Tristan Da Silva made your team last time. Honorable mention right now. I think Khalil Ware, Keyshawn George, the AJ Mitchell injury is a real bummer because it was just kind of another dude where it's like, they really draft this. He's on a 2-way. He's defending like this. Is he going to make an all rookie team? Yeah. And then a name to keep an eye on because now they need him to play and he's back from injury and he's been on kind of a heater. Rob Dillingham. Like if we do this again, like at the 3/4 mark, he might just be all rookie first team at that point.
I know it's anecdotal, but now that he's back in the stretches I've seen him play, it's like undeniable that he unlocks like parts of the Wolves offense that just don't get like touched on unless he's out there. He really like just being quick, just being able to smoke his guy off the dribble is just like no one on the whole team does that. He really does have, there is like utility for this guy. So just stay healthy. Cause I agree. I think there's a great chance that he just is impactful enough to climb into this group.
Did you consider, we had Dalton Connect, I think, on a team last time. Oof. Jamal Shed, his shooting is ticked up. He's at 37% from 3. He's a name that I considered. Tijon Salon, man. I'm just looking, that's just been such a rough go in Charlotte.
I don't know what to do with him. I think they like seem to think he's just going to be a 3-point shooter, or maybe that's the only thing that like you stand over there and like do that for now. I think it's not a great situation.
Cody Williams was not considered again, and that's a real bummer for my preseason takes.
I mean, he had like one great G League game shortly after that demotion, and then continues to he's like not out there.
They need to trade him to the Thunder, and then him and J-Dub could.
That's what it's all a long con. That's what this has been about.
Next up for us, most improved player. This one's mine. So I have Norm Powell, number 1. He's been. I think I told you before, I think I get caught up in trying to figure out what's the proper way to view this award. And I just think we're always kind of looking for like the really good player that made the leap to stardom. But I'm almost more impressed by someone who is a decade or whatever into their career and then is doing this. And like the Norman Powell, his scoring is way up. The efficiency is still there, doing more as a driver, more as a self-creator, a little bit more as a passer. This is crazy though, Grant. Among everyone who's logged at least 1,000 minutes, Powell has the second largest increase in true usage, and true usage incorporates passing and scoring as well as potential assists. And he has the fourth, Grant, largest increase in self-created shot making. That's like, I understand that's a function of what they've needed out of him this year. That's kind of the point. Where it's all like, you've been in the league for this many years, you're coming in and you're doing that. So I had him, and then I struggled with the back of my ballot. Evan Mobley at second. He's just better in every single aspect. And I know people don't like looking at these. Some people don't like looking at the big names and saying it's them. I did think about putting Cade Cunningham number 3, but the more I watch the Pistons, I think he's gotten better as a defender and a rebounder. And like some of the offensive field's gotten better. To me, I look at it and say the Pistons had net negative spacing, and now they don't. And this is what Cade Cunningham would have been already. That's not a shot at him if you did include him. Mm-hmm. I just went with Julian Champagnie. That's not supposed to be the I know ball pick. It's just he's been really good. When you look at what he's doing defensively and kind of typifying like the 3 and D stuff for them, and he's just way better. Like his role is way high volume. So I tried to run I won't even say I tried because you basically allowed me to just put Champagnie at the bottom. It was, I'm going to pick the guy who's well into his career that's made a jump, the young player who's making the leap into patent stardom, and then this sort of guy with a limited track record who's burst onto the scene. And so I tried to cover every single spectrum of that.
You forgot the only other type you could include. It's just throw Jalen Johnson on there as the guy that like, actually the leap was kind of last year, but we're acknowledging it this year. That's right. Oversimplification. That's the only other category you missed. So almost, but we're only going 3. So you did the best you could. The only difference, so I have Mobley first. We've talked plenty. I just think that he's a legitimate offensive weapon in a great offense and is like kind of integral to it functioning because of what he can do now off the dribble. That was just not a skill he had previously. Defense is whatever. He was great before. He's slightly greater now. Just his driving, his physicality that the 3-point shooting is like, oh, that's where the leap is supposed to come. It is there. It's a volume question still, but he is someone that is making threes now. Cade, I really struggle with Cade for the exact same reasons. I just don't know how much of it is context. I do think you can say like, you can credit him for taking advantage of the context and having shooting around him for the first time ever. It wasn't a guarantee that he would become, a more prolific scorer and assist guy. Maybe it should have been the expectation. I just still think to deliver on that expectation and be the singular, driver, the main driver, not singular, that's too narrow. The main driver of success on a Pistons team that's good now. Like that is, like might make a postseason appearance, has been over 500 deeper into a season than at any point in a really long time. Like, I don't know. It's just it's pro Cade propaganda. I think he didn't make an all-star team, but I think you could.
Just now was more compelling to put him on one of your all-NBA teams.
Right. We talk about like which level of leap or which level of improvement matters more. Like the biggest deal is when a guy does like what Shea did a couple of years ago, where it's you're all-star caliber maybe, and then you're suddenly an MVP guy. I think Cade went from like good numbers on a team that's going nowhere to someone that we both like basically had to bend over backwards to not put on our all-star team. So, and then Powell, you made the case for Powell. He's my 3rd pick there.
Other names that I considered, and I'm sure you did, and maybe you'll have some differences. And then I have this guy in the wrong column. So if anyone is still listening, and all defense, he's missed 15 games. And I still think just when you look at how much the other guys have played, like Andrew Nembhard, if he doesn't miss another game, is probably going to make one of my all defense. That guy's been a monster.
Really good.
So that's I have him listed under most improved player. I did not consider him for most improved player. But I had Zubats under here too. RJ Barrett, I know the efficiency has come down, but just like the level of playmaking he has to shoulder. I do think I still put J-Dub in here, even though the offensive efficiency kind of declined. Tyler Hero, Peyton Pritchard, Jalen Johnson, of course. If you picked second-year players, Wemby could just be the answer.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to make. We go through this every year. I'm not going to belabor here. I didn't pick them, but those are some of the other names that I had considered. Anything from you?
I have all those. I think, did you mention throughout Jalen Johnson? Did you mention DeAndre Hunter? That's another one where it's like, is he better or is he just healthy and gets to play against backup?
Yeah.
Austin Reeves, I don't know why the Lakers didn't just think he was a point guard this whole time. Like that works. Like, and I do think there were enough signs earlier in his career that, yeah, he can just be the guy on the ball. And that's so.
Do you think he does enough as a threat of a scorer on the ball for that? Because I think part of when I'm watching them, and a big criticism has been they just can't blow out teams.
Yeah.
And I just find myself wondering, I don't think D'Angelo Russell was the difference between this, but when you have one trustworthy from scratch creator for both himself and others, it's probably kind of hard to create that separation between you and even bad opponents, let alone good ones.
I think maybe not on any team, but on the Lakers, who do get plenty of playmaking from LeBron, and the offense still, kind of can sometimes orbit around Anthony Davis. I'm okay with him I think like point guard is perfectly fine for him. Like, yeah, I concede that he's not going to blow by guys that often, but he's really clever. He's a good passer, and and has been like a great shooter in like a lower usage role. So I don't know. I think it's fair to question, like, is he really different, or did they just finally like use him in a different way and he could have done this all along? I think it's probably more the former. He's just improved enough to where like this is a more viable strategy.
Yeah, for sure. Are you ready to take us through 6 man of the year?
Yes, I am. So I've got Peyton Pritchard number 1. Just the 3-point volume. It's just the consistency of his scoring. This wasn't really hard. I would be surprised if he doesn't win it.
Do you know what made it easier? I won't spoil it, but because there's a chance that both of our number 2 just might not be eligible for this award by season end.
Right. Yeah. So I have Amen Thompson number 2, and I have Scottie Pippen Jr. 3rd. The numbers are close. There are definitely some other guys you could consider at 3. You have somebody else. I just think Pippen, like John Morant's has missed close to half the season, and Pippen as just a really good on-ball defender against point guards, and as a guy that can run the offense, it's great. I think you had an incredible driving stat on him last time we did this. Good enough shooter. Like he's basically a starter that just happens to play behind John Morant. So he was my 3rd there. So who do you have? And
I have the same 2, Pritchard and Amen Thompson, and then I have DeAndre Hunter. I mean, you laid out his case. I mean, he's just coming off the bench, pumping in points, playing reasonable defenses, but the efficiency is better from him. The decision making overall on offense is better. I also think that, and this would be his case. And I guess Thompson's as of right now. I mean, he's starting, so it's weird. Mm-hmm. But someone once asked me, like, why don't you look at it more through the lens of which player comes off the bench and is good enough and has a reasonable shot at closing? And so if you were going to lean on that, I think that's a fair way to look at it. Yeah. DeAndre Hunter or Amen Thompson would probably be the picks. And just given now, if you think, do you think Amen Thompson's going to stick in the starting lineup the rest of the year? I know a lot of it will depend on like Jabari Smith's availability.
I just think Jabari Smith's shooting is, if you're, it's the same old thing of like, you've got Şengün as the 5 who's not going to space. You got to get it somewhere. You can't, unless it's Amen Thompson playing point guard and Fred VanVleet is somewhere else, and you can get another shooter out there. I just think that the shooting makes it tough, and this isn't a great Rockets offense as it is. So I would assume Smith will get that job back, but Thompson fits the criteria you're talking about. Like that guy closes on a lot of teams and starts on a lot of teams.
Did consider Ty Jerome a little bit. Case is not nearly as strong as it was last time. Ditto for Karis LeVert. Nickeil Alexander-Walker ended up being my toughest cut for this. I think Malik Beasley deserves some love here, and so does Santi Aldama of Memphis. I did have Scottie Pippen Jr. on my long list as well. Did you have anybody else that you looked at? And then we both looked at Buddy Hield last time. Guess what? Oof. I didn't look at him this
time. not looking at him so much. I don't know if you mentioned Karis LeVert is another guy. I think.
Okay, I was going to ask you if you think that this guy would have. Finish your list. Let me see if he's on it first.
No, I had my short list was Hunter was I think probably my toughest cut. LeVert, nah. Aldama, as you said, everyone I thought of Aldama, Beasley. I didn't really think about Ty Jerome just because I was kind of like lukewarm on the sustainability of that last time around. Good, really good bench player, but I don't have him on my long list.
If he comes back and starts playing soon, and given how he was playing at the time of injury, and now that he's coming off the bench, is there enough time for Jonathan Kuminga to enter this discussion?
Won't he have? How many games will he have missed?
I think he's at like. It might be 15 or something. No,
yeah, I think he's gonna. I assume he's going to start when he comes back. If he, but that's been an incorrect assumption basically throughout his whole career, other than like a few isolated stretches.
So he's played in 32 games. So that number is actually higher than I thought. And the Warriors so far this season have played. He's only missed 10.
Yeah. I mean, he could be on like a down ballot pick. Like he's not going to threaten Peyton Pritchard. I'll tell you that. And like maybe Amen Thompson starts too much and he falls off for that reason. And so you might have to think about him for third, but like, who knows, man? Who knows why? Maybe they'll just not rush him back and tank. I don't know.
His agent should push for it because the Warriors clearly don't care about this season anymore or whatever. And so have him continue to come off the bench, average like 30 points per game coming off the bench, win the 6th Man of the Year award, and then there's your negotiating leverage during restricted free agency. Everybody's favorite award is up next. Coach of the Year. If you're looking for diversity, don't turn to Grant and I.
So did you have, so I'll just say it because they're the same. I don't know if it's my turn or not. Jenkins 1, Kenny Atkinson 2, Tyronn Lue 3, which neither of us had on our ballot last time. We both had a similar like epiphany, I suppose, independently because we didn't talk about this one. I think, did you or I have Atkinson first last time? I think maybe I did.
I can actually look while you're vamping.
So the reason I'll just talk about who I have now at first. And
so we actually both had, no, you had Atkinson first. I had Jenkins first last time.
So I guess then I'm the one that has to explain it. So Atkinson's done an incredible job. Like things work now in Cleveland that didn't work before. And the team is going to win the East by 1,000,000 games. It seems like. I just think Jenkins has had like kind of more to deal with. Like they're starting 2 rookies pretty often. They're missing John Morant every other night so far. Like, you're having to, I mean, this is where you credit him. It's not like you're having to do this, but you've implemented this offensive system that nobody else is playing and it's really working. And to have the balls to do that, like on a team with real expectations coming into the season is like, that's significant. I think like, it's not just how good of a motivator are you and where do you rank on offense and defense? It's like the decisions you make that are not easy ones to like establish an identity. Like that's kind of wishy-washy, but that feels like a big deal to me. So I think, and you don't have Gigi Jackson until like a couple days ago. You don't have, there's like Jake LaRavia is good. Santi Aldama is in the 6-man conversation. You're just getting everybody to play their best. So I think I feel really good about having him first. And I think I'm probably going to leave him there for the balance of the year unless something crazy happens.
Well, they're going to get too healthy and then that's going to be their downfall. He's not going to know what the Gigi
guys will get pissed off because they're like, I'm definitely good enough to be in the rotation. How come I'm the 12th guy now?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could go with Atkinson or Jenkins, have a pretty strong case here. The Lue thing, I don't know if it was an epiphany, but the Clippers just seem to be getting more experimental. And some of the stuff he's done with like kind of diminishing certain player roles, increasing sort of some of the lineup usage there. I don't know if they've necessarily been creative enough on offense, but I also don't know if they have the optionality to be creative enough.
That's the whole case for him to me is it's just like coming into the season, we thought they were going to be terrible. And he's figured out how to make James Harden for most of the year, James Harden and some defenders. And I don't know if we credit him for Norm Powell because where's the offense without him? But like he figured out how to make a really like kind of a mess work pretty well.
And the couple games I've seen from Kawhi Leonard, like those minutes, the spacing completely changes when he's on the court. And so that's a credit to Kawhi Leonard, but it's also like, oh, this is what Ty Lue can do if you give him actual NBA offensive personnel to work with. Other coaches that you want to take through there's probably a long list of names that you could have gone with.
Yeah. I mean, Ime Udoka, I think has been kind of we might've had him top 3 at some point. Joe Mazzulla, even though I think the Celtics are just like half asleep at this point, not necessarily on him. Mark Daigneault, those are the big 3 for me. I guess Jamal Mosley, but like, I don't know what to do with that team as injured as it's been. Anybody else you thought about?
Tell them, well, they are taking more 3s in Orlando, but like, the fact that they can't play faster, I just don't understand. Like they force turnovers, they'll get out in transition. You grab a live board, fucking run. I don't understand that team. This is like year 3 of me being infuriated by this. So he was certainly on the list. I don't think I had anybody else that I threw on there. I mean, Mark Daigneault, of course, could just be in there. I don't know if you mentioned him, obviously. Yeah.
And a guy who fell off probably unfairly is Jordi Fernandez. Like, I don't know they were good when they weren't supposed to be, and they didn't have a lot of talent. Now that they're less talented, they're not. They're
like they go toe to toe with the Knicks, and I know the Knicks like to make everything more difficult, but they go toe to toe with them on Tuesday night. So I think there's this Coach of the Year ballot. I think ours last year was like we went like 15 names deep, And does it feel like it's shrunk a little this year to where there's like more of a delineation?
I've never had an easier time like just saying, "Oh, this is the top 3," and I don't think 4th is particularly close. So yeah, I think that's pretty clear.
Now we're on to everyone's favorite award,
Good.
the most important one, Executive of the Year.
All right. So I had Sam Presti 1, Sean Marks 2, and Zach Kleiman 3.
That Jay Huff contract, you're digging it, huh?
I'm just a huge fan. So I think I had Marks first last time, and I flipped it just partly because the logic that it's just way harder to sort of add pieces on a really good team and manage those types of decisions than it is to just like some team comes to you with a crazy ass offer and you say, "Yep, I will take all those picks for Mikal Bridges." He hired Jordy Fernandez. That's great. But it's like the things that the Nets have done well were just sort of like presented to them. And it's like, yeah, anybody's going to say yes to most of that. Right. So I don't know. I think he's still number 2 for me. So it's not like he's done a bad job. I think he's done a great job. I think Presti just had the harder, like the heavier lift, the just tougher machinations, and you're talking about like a trade we kind of got wrong on the last pod, like just little moves that allow you to go get Isaiah Hartenstein. Like That's kind of a last year thing, but that's a factor. Picking AJ Mitchell, that's he's hurt, but like,
by the way, that's the case is that it's and I might have said this last time, but at some point this season, I found myself saying the Thunder they've let them get AJ Mitchell. And the fact that we're saying that when he did all this other stuff on a team that's that good and AJ Mitchell's getting rotation minutes, it's over. Like, it's just, I agree with your point on everything, just how his job is harder. And the thing we got wrong for anyone who cares, I did not include Vasa Micic going to Charlotte as part of that Gordon Hayward trade. So that lopped off more money for OKC, and it set them up to more easily go about their offseason and get Isaiah Hartenstein. So I apologize I'm just making mistakes left and right over the past couple weeks. Shame on me. I have Nico Harrison 3 instead of Kleiman's a really good choice. Daryl Morey is not here, notably. Would you predicted that at the beginning of the season? But so for Nico Harrison with me, and it's about to maybe be put to the test. I know maybe you wanted Najee Marshall to be more efficient from 3, but like the hand he was dealt heading into the offseason, and you turned it into like no cap flexibility, and you lose Derek Jones Jr., Tim Hardaway Jr., and seconds, and you get back Quentin Grimes, Klay Thompson, and Najee Marshall, just like a home run. I know he's not playing as well right now, but like Spencer Dinwiddie was giving him really good minutes at one point in Dallas, and we'll see kind of how this roster. I think some people will move away from him because Dallas's record is meh right now. I think because of all the injuries. I'm curious to see if they'll go get another wing defender at the deadline, or is it now, can we figure out a way to get a different type of big with the Derek Lively injury being out 2 to 3 months, which is, I mean, if it's 3 months and we're in January, we're talking the end of April.
It's a playoff impact thing for sure. Yeah. We'll see what he does. I mean, just home runs last trade deadline. So pretty easy to be confident.
And I did, by the way, I did have him penciled in as 3 for a minute, but then I thought I was letting the injuries in Dallas, I think, and the suspension of Najee Marshall, I guess, like permeate my thinking too much. Trajan Langdon in Detroit, we both did not love what they got back for Tim Hardaway, like giving up Quentin Grimes. They got seconds, and Tim Hardaway Jr. has helped them this year. Yeah. He has signed Malik Beasley, who is in the 6th man of the year discussion and has been super helpful for them. And by the way, Cade Cunningham, people kind of poo-pooed the max extension. And I think his decision was tougher than I mean, Evan Mobley, Scotty Barnes, like, okay, those decisions are kind of easy. And maybe Cade Cunningham was easy, but he didn't draft Cade Cunningham. And so committing to Cade Cunningham in theory is harder. And that choice is now paying off. So I think that front office deserves some love here too.
I agree. I think that's a good inclusion. I think Lawrence Frank is another one. Like Chris Dunn, Derek Jones Jr. Like, I guess some of it felt like, well, what else are we going to do? Not bringing Paul George back looks pretty good. Not taking on bad money in a sign and trade to move Paul George looks pretty good. The Clippers are just a big surprise, and we got to find credit someplace.
Yeah, no, I think, the Clippers are they the biggest surprise of the season? I guess you could make a case for Detroit, but the Clippers are in the West and a playoff team.
Right.
So they lose Paul George, no Kawhi, and they don't, who is their second best players? Like Norman Powell has like all-star credentials, basically. It's just way out of, I think prior to the season, had you told me that this is where we'd be at the halfway mark, I'd been more apt to believe what you say about the Pistons than the Clippers.
Absolutely. We buried the Clippers. I think everybody kind of did, but that's going to be our biggest over/under miss, I'm sure. Yeah, like
we'll do a check-in with that over the All-Star break. People have been asking for it. I mean, I want to give people a reason to listen to the end of season 1. I don't know how much is going to change from the midseason, but we will do an update in advance of the All-Star break. Grant, we did it in under 90 minutes. I think if we didn't have something else we wanted to talk about today, it probably would have ended up being more of our trademark length. But how are you feeling after that?
I feel better than I did going in because I think we commiserated. We shared in the difficulty of the exercise. So that always is helpful to me. Do you feel better or worse?
I'm still equivocating on everything. That's how I feel. Are you are you ready if anyone's watching?
Can we talk about the timing of the mute on that sneeze? If you're watching, you probably thought I just had a seizure of some kind, but if you're listening, you don't know what just happened.
A magician, as always. Are you ready to take us out of here?
Sure. Just see if I need to head off any more sneeze. I think we're good. I can get through 30 seconds. Thanks everybody for listening, for watching. Remember, if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe, thumbs up, leave some comments. Let us know what you think. Let us know where we erred, where you agree. All that stuff is very helpful. Make sure you're sharing this with as many people as you think might be interested in it, and share it with people that aren't interested. Rate, review, subscribe. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. Shouts, Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.